Imagine a doctor examining a critical patient, only to discover a distinctive birthmark, one that triggers a flood of painful memories from 12 years ago. What would you do when a routine medical examination suddenly connects to your deepest personal loss? And how would you handle discovering a truth so shocking it threatens to unravel everything you believed about your past, while a young life hangs in the balance? This extraordinary story of mystery, medical urgency, and unexpected connections is about to unfold before your eyes, revealing how a simple physical mark and a doctor's instinct may lead to revelations that have been buried for more than a decade. Before we dive into this emotional journey, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true-life stories that will touch your heart and soul. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly uploads. At the busy Memorial Hospital in Chicago, Dr. Helen Martin, a respected 40-year-old infectious disease specialist, walked hurriedly through the pediatric ward corridors. Her heels echoed on the vinyl floor as she mentally reviewed her next case. Chicago's autumn painted the hospital windows with shades of orange and red, contrasting with the seriousness of the environment. "Dr. Helen, we have a complicated case in Ward 3. Dr. Richard Thompson, head of the department, handed her a chart. 12-year-old boy, severe symptoms we can't diagnose. Persistent fever, extreme fatigue, swollen lymph nodes." Helen flipped through the chart. Jason Warner, admitted 3 days ago. No response to antibiotics? Exactly. I've gone through all possible protocols. I'm calling you in because we need a fresh perspective. Helen entered room 307. The air conditioning made the environment cold and antiseptic. In the hospital bed, a boy with light brown hair and pale skin was breathing with difficulty. Next to him, a tired-looking woman held his hand. "Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Helen Martin. I'm here to examine Jason." "Christine Warner," the woman replied. "I'm his mother. Please help my son, doctor." Helen approached the bed. Jason briefly opened his eyes, intensely blue and feverish. "Hi, Jason. I'll need to examine you. Is that okay?" The boy nodded weakly. Helen began to examine him methodically, checking vital signs, palpating lymph nodes, examining his throat. When she lifted the sleeve of his hospital pajamas to check the boy's arm, her heart skipped a beat. There, just below his right shoulder, was a crescent-shaped birthmark, identical to the one she herself carried in the same place. Helen felt the world spin. She disguised her disturbance, continuing the examination with slightly trembling hands. Memories she had tried to bury for 12 years came back like an avalanche. The hospital in Denver, the difficult childbirth, the baby she saw only once before being sedated due to complications. And then, the nightmare. "I'm sorry, Dr. Martin. Your son didn't survive." "Doctor, are you okay?" "Mrs." Warner's voice brought Helen back to the present. "Yes, sorry." Helen cleared her throat. "I'll order new tests. Jason presents complex symptoms that we need to investigate further." Upon leaving the room, Helen leaned against the corridor wall, breathing deeply. Her hands were shaking. It was too much of a coincidence. The age, the identical birthmark, and even the eyes, just like David's, her ex-husband's. At the nursing station, she found Charles, a nurse she trusted. "Charles, I need a favor. It's confidential and urgent." Her voice came out almost as a whisper. "Of course, Dr. Helen. I need you to draw a sample of my blood and compare it with patient Jason Warner's. Complete typing, without registering it in the system." Charles frowned. "That's irregular, doctor." "I know, but it's a matter of life and death. Please, Charles." While waiting for the results, Helen immersed herself in Jason's medical records, determined to find a diagnosis. The hours dragged on. She sent samples for more specific tests, suspecting a rare autoimmune disease or fulminant hepatitis. It was past 9 at night when Charles entered her office, carefully closing the door. "Here are the results you asked for." He handed her an envelope. With trembling fingers, Helen opened the envelope. The genetic markers confirmed it. Parental compatibility. Jason was her son. The tears came instantly. 12 years of mourning a child who was alive. 12 years believing a lie. "Doctor?" Charles looked concerned. "Thank you, Charles. Please, this can't leave this room." Alone in her office, Helen allowed herself a few minutes of despair. Then, she wiped away her tears. Her son was sick, seriously ill, and she needed to save him before anything else. Jason's tests revealed the worst-case scenario: acute liver failure. He would need an urgent liver transplant. The fluorescent light in the doctor's room flickered as Helen stared fixedly at the computer screen. The results left no doubt. Jason Warner was not only her son, but also in critical condition. Fulminant liver failure, probably caused by undiagnosed autoimmune hepatitis. Helen pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to hold back tears. The clock on the wall marked 11:45 p.m. Outside, Chicago slept under a light autumn rain. "I need to stay focused," she muttered to herself. She knew she couldn't reveal that she was Jason's biological mother. She would immediately be removed from the case due to the conflict of interest. But she also knew she needed to act quickly. Her medical and maternal mind worked at an accelerated pace. First, she needed to confirm the diagnosis and start treatment to stabilize Jason. Then, find a compatible donor. Helen requested the complete battery of tests to confirm autoimmune hepatitis and checked her own compatibility for donation. Hours later, the results brought confirmation of the diagnosis, but also devastating news. Her blood type and other important markers were not ideal for donation. "We need to put him on the transplant list," she informed Dr. Thompson the next morning, maintaining professional composure. "His condition is critical." "I agree," Thompson replied, studying the results. "But you know how the waiting list is. It could take weeks, and given his state—" "Weeks he doesn't have," Helen completed, feeling a lump in her throat. Christine Warner broke down in tears when Helen explained the situation. Jason needed to be transferred to the pediatric ICU. "Isn't there anything we can do?" Christine asked between sobs. "We're exploring all options," Helen replied, fighting the urge to reveal everything right there. "A living donor would be ideal. Any blood relatives?" "It's just me and him," Christine replied. "My husband left us when Jason was only 2. And even before that, he never cared much." Helen nodded, feeling a mixture of anger and determination. "Mrs. Warner, I'll do everything in my power to save your son." That night, alone in her apartment, Helen opened a box she had kept for years. Inside it, a wedding ring, a few photographs, and an old business card. David Miller, civil engineer. Her ex-husband, Jason's biological father. They had met during Helen's medical residency. David, a civil engineer working on an infrastructure project in Denver, was charismatic and intense. The marriage was quick, as was the pregnancy. But after the supposed death of the baby, David became distant, unable to cope with the loss. 6 months later, they divorced, and David relocated to Los Angeles to work on a new project. Helen typed his name into Facebook. She found several profiles but recognized him immediately in one of them. David Miller, now living in Los Angeles, California. In the photos, he appeared at construction sites, on beaches, always alone or with colleagues. No sign of a new family. With her heart racing, she sent a message. "David, it's Helen. I know it's been a long time, but I need to talk to you urgently about something that will change our lives. Please call me at this number as soon as possible." The response came just 2 hours later. "Helen, what happened? Are you okay?" She took a deep breath and called. "David!" Her voice trembled upon hearing his breathing on the other end of the line. "What I'm about to tell you will sound crazy, but I need you to listen to the end. In a conversation lasting almost an hour, Helen told him everything: the encounter with Jason, the birthmark, the DNA test, the serious illness. David alternated between shocked silences and desperate questions. My God, Helen, our son is alive. And he's dying? His voice broke on the last word. He needs a liver transplant, David. I tested my compatibility, but I'm not an ideal donor. You might be. I'm catching the next flight to Chicago, he responded without hesitation. Send me the hospital address. I'll be there tomorrow morning. The next morning, Helen could barely concentrate. Jason had been transferred to the ICU during the night, his condition rapidly worsening. She monitored his vital signs every hour, feeling helpless. At 10:15, her phone vibrated with a message. Arrived at the hospital. I'm at reception. Helen quickly went downstairs. David was there, with the same strong face, now framed by gray strands at the temples. When their eyes met, 12 years of separation seemed to vanish. Helen! He stepped forward, impulsively embracing her. She allowed herself the embrace for a moment before stepping back. Thank you for coming so quickly. We need to act. What do I need to do? First, compatibility tests. Then, she hesitated. David, legally, he has parents. We can't just walk in there and tell the truth. Not yet. I understand, he replied, though his gaze betrayed his anxiety. I want to see my son, Helen, even if from a distance. Let's do the tests first. If you're compatible, we'll create a story. We'll say you're a donor from the volunteer program. David nodded, determined. Let's save our son. The tests were conducted urgently. Helen used her influence to expedite the results, which arrived late in the afternoon. David was a compatible donor. Thank God, Helen murmured when Charles handed her the results. That night, she explained the situation to Christine Warner, omitting the most important truth. We've found a potential donor through the volunteer donor program. He's a 42-year-old man with very good compatibility. Christine cried with relief, grasping Helen's hands. How can we thank this man? He doesn't want recognition, Helen replied, feeling terrible about the lie but knowing it was necessary at the moment. He just wants to help. The next day, David finally saw Jason through the ICU glass. Helen watched from a distance as he placed his hand on the glass, staring intently at the unconscious boy in the bed. He has your eyes, said Helen, approaching. David didn't respond, but the silent tears streaming down his face said everything. If you're enjoying this emotional journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button now. We're just getting to the most intense part of the story, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories like this one to light. Operating room number 4 at Memorial Hospital gleamed with the intensity of the surgical lights. The air was heavy with tension and antiseptic. Helen, unable to participate in the operation due to her close involvement with the case as the diagnosing physician, observed through the glass of the observation room. Her mind wandered between the present moment and the past. Denver, 12 years ago. The university hospital where she had given birth. The hurried nurses. The postpartum complication. The heavy sedation that left her unconscious for almost 2 days. And then, the devastating news. Your son didn't make it. No body to see. Vague explanations about hospital procedures already carried out. Dr. Martin? Nurse Jones's voice brought her back to the present. The surgery began 10 minutes ago. Dr. Miller says everything is going well so far. Helen nodded, trying to maintain professional composure. On the other side of the glass, Dr. Miller, one of the country's best transplant surgeons, worked methodically. On one table was David, her ex-husband, donating part of his liver. On the other, Jason, her lost son, receiving the organ that could save him. In the waiting corridor, Christine Warner waited alone, bent over a rosary, murmuring prayers. Helen had briefly spoken with her before the surgery. With each interaction, she felt more guilty and conflicted. That woman had raised her son for 12 years, believing she was his mother. And Helen knew that, regardless of the outcome, she was about to destroy her life. The hours passed slowly. Helen alternated between the observation room and her office, where she obsessively reviewed every detail of Jason's case and investigated what might have happened 12 years ago. Calls to the hospital in Denver, research on cases of baby theft, painful memories she tried to organize like pieces of a sinister puzzle. Finally, after 7 hours of surgery, Dr. Miller left the operating room. The transplant was successful, he informed, removing his surgical mask. Both are stable. The donor is already in the recovery room, and the boy is being transferred to the transplant ICU. Helen let out a trembling sigh of relief. "Thank you, Mark. You don't know how much this means." The surgeon nodded, observing her with curiosity. "You seem very involved in this case, Helen." "It's a case that deeply touched me," she replied, averting her gaze. In the recovery room, David was waking up from anesthesia. Helen entered silently, observing her ex-husband. Despite everything, she felt immense gratitude toward him at that moment. "Helen?" His voice was hoarse. "Jason!" The surgery was a success. "He's stable." David closed his eyes, relieved. "When can I see him?" "Soon." "But David..." Helen sat in the chair beside the bed. "We need to talk about the next step, about how we're going to reveal the truth." In the following 48 hours, Jason showed positive signs of recovery. His body was accepting the new organ, and the doctors were optimistic. David, recovering more quickly, visited his son every day, introducing himself to Christine as the anonymous donor who had decided to reveal his identity. Helen, meanwhile, had made a decision. After consulting with a lawyer specializing in family law and talking at length with David, she decided it was time to seek the full truth. On the morning of the third post-operative day, Helen entered the Central Chicago Police Station. She introduced herself to Detective Garcia, a specialist in missing persons cases, and told her story. The medical evidence, the DNA test, the identical birthmark, everything pointed to the fact that Jason Warner was actually Michael Martin Miller, her supposedly deceased son. Detective Garcia listened attentively, taking detailed notes. "I'll initiate an immediate investigation, Dr. Martin, but I need to warn you that this process can be long and painful for all parties involved." "I understand," replied Helen, "but after 12 years believing my son was dead, I can't simply ignore the truth." Back at the hospital, Helen found David in Jason's room. The boy was still sedated, but his vital signs were constantly improving. "How did it go at the police station?" David asked quietly. "They're going to investigate. Detective Garcia seems competent." Helen looked at her son. "David, I've been thinking, how could this have happened? Who would do something like this?" David frowned, thoughtful. "I remember something strange from that time. There was a nurse who was always around during your pregnancy. Mary, I think was her name. She seemed obsessive with our baby." Helen felt a shiver run down her spine. "Mary Thompson? Tall, blonde hair?" "Yes, I think so. Why?" "Christine Warner mentioned that she adopted Jason through a private agency. The intermediary was a woman named Mary, who worked in hospitals." Helen felt her heart race. "David, what if it wasn't a coincidence?" That afternoon, Helen scheduled a meeting with Christine Warner in the hospital cafeteria. It was time for a difficult conversation. "Mrs. Warner, thank you for coming," Helen began, feeling her mouth dry. "There's something very important I need to discuss with you about Jason." Christine looked apprehensive. "Did something happen to my son?" "Jason is recovering well," Helen assured. "It's about his origin that we need to talk." With care and compassion, Helen explained the situation. The DNA test, the ongoing police investigation, her suspicions about how Jason had been taken from her at birth. Christine turned pale, then flushed with anger. "This is absurd. Are you saying my son was stolen? That I participated in a crime?" "No," Helen replied firmly. "I believe you're also a victim in this situation. Please, tell me how Jason came to you." After moments of tension and tears, Christine began to speak. She and her ex-husband couldn't have children. After years of unsuccessful attempts, they met Mary Thompson, who worked as an intermediary in private adoptions. She said the biological mother was a teenager who couldn't raise the baby, explained Christine, now crying silently. "We paid a significant amount for legal and hospital services. I never imagined, never thought." Helen extended her hand, holding Christine's. "I believe you, and I know you loved and cared for Jason all these years. But now we need to find out the truth, for his sake." Christine nodded through tears. "What happens now?" "The police will investigate Mary Thompson and the adoption agency. As for Jason, when he's better, we'll have to tell him the truth. Together." 6 weeks had passed since the transplant. Chicago's autumn gave way to the beginning of winter, with the first snowflakes falling over the city. In room 415 of Memorial Hospital, Jason Warner, or Michael, as Helen silently called him in her thoughts, sat on the bed, considerably stronger, leafing through a science magazine. His recovery had been remarkable. The transplanted liver was functioning perfectly, and the doctors were optimistic about his complete recovery. Physically, he improved each day. Emotionally, the storm was just beginning. Helen stopped at the door of the room, observing the boy. In these weeks, she had grown closer to him as a doctor, making frequent visits, talking about science, discovering that he dreamed of being a doctor someday. Each interaction was precious and painful at the same time, getting to know her son without being able to embrace him as a mother. "Good morning, Jason," she greeted, entering the room. "How are you feeling today?" The boy smiled. He had David's smile, Helen thought. "Better, Dr. Helen. That pain on the right side is almost gone." "Great. The latest tests show your body is accepting the transplant very well." Helen sat in the chair near the bed. "Jason, your mother and Mr. Miller will arrive soon. We have something important to talk to you about." Jason frowned, his expression suddenly serious. "Is it something bad? Am I sick again?" "No, it's not about your health," Helen assured. "It's complicated. But you're fine. That's the most important thing." A soft knock on the door announced Christine and David's arrival. In the past weeks, an uncomfortable truce had been established between the three adults. The police investigation was advancing. Mary Thompson had been located in Arizona and was being interrogated. Fake death and adoption documents were discovered, creating a solid case. "Hi, Mom," said Jason, smiling at Christine. Then he looked at David, with whom he had developed a friendship in recent weeks. "Hi, Mr. Miller." David smiled nervously. "Hi, Jason." Helen indicated the chairs for everyone to sit. "Jason, what we're going to talk about today is very difficult and complex. We want you to know that everyone here cares deeply about you." Christine took her son's hand, her eyes already teary. "Jason, remember when I told you that you were adopted when you were a baby?" The boy nodded. "You said my biological mother was very young and couldn't raise me." "Yes," Christine took a deep breath. "But recently we discovered that's not the whole truth." With care and many pauses to answer Jason's confused questions, the three adults explained the situation. The birth in Denver, the supposed death reported to Helen, the fraudulent adoption organized by Mary Thompson, the providential encounter at the hospital, and the discovery through the birthmark and DNA test. Jason listened with wide eyes, alternating his gaze between the three adults, especially focusing on Helen with a new understanding. "So, you're my biological mother?" he finally asked Helen, his voice small and uncertain. Helen felt the tears flow freely. "Yes, Jason. Biologically, I'm your mother. And, Mr. Miller, I'm your biological father, David completed, emotional. That's why my liver was compatible with yours. The silence that followed was dense with emotions. Jason looked at Christine, who was crying silently. But you'll always be my mom, too, he said to Christine, squeezing her hand. You raised me. You loved me all this time. Christine sobbed, hugging her son. I love you more than anything, Jason. I never knew, never imagined. We know it's a lot of information to process, Helen said softly. And we want you to know that you don't need to make any decisions now. We all want what's best for you. Jason nodded, suddenly seeming much older than his 12 years. What will happen to the woman who did this? The police are taking care of that, David replied. It seems she did the same with other babies over the years. In the days that followed, Jason had sessions with a child psychologist specializing in trauma. Helen, David, and Christine also received psychological support, trying to navigate that unprecedented situation. The police investigation revealed a baby trafficking network operated by Mary Thompson and accomplices in various hospitals across the country. Helen discovered she wasn't alone in her pain. 5 other families had gone through similar situations, believing their babies had died when in fact they were sold for adoption. 2 weeks later, in a hospital conference room, Helen, David, Christine, and Jason met with their lawyers and social workers to discuss the future. Considering the extraordinary circumstances, began the social worker, we're seeking a solution that prioritizes Jason's emotional well-being. Dr. Martin and Mr. Miller have legal rights as biological parents, but we recognize the deep bond Jason has with Mrs. Warner. Jason, who had been quiet, finally spoke. I want to get to know my biological parents better, but I don't want to lose my mom, Christine. Christine smiled sadly. You'll never lose me, dear. Seat. After hours of discussion, a preliminary solution was established. Jason would continue living with Christine, who would maintain legal custody, but would spend time regularly with Helen and David, gradually building relationships. The situation would be reassessed periodically, always prioritizing Jason's wishes and well-being. That night, Helen walked through Millennium Park, observing the city lights reflected in the bean, the famous metallic sculpture. David joined her, both processing the events of the past weeks. I never imagined our lives would take this turn, said David, looking at the night sky. Losing our son, then losing each other. And now we have a second chance, Helen completed. Not as a couple, but as parents. David nodded. He's an amazing kid. Christine did a good job. Yes, she did. Helen paused. I'm thinking of transferring to the pediatric unit permanently, and maybe buying a larger apartment with a room for Jason. I'm also considering moving to Chicago, David confessed. My work allows me some flexibility. They walked in silence for a few minutes, contemplating the uncertain but hopeful future opening up ahead. A few weeks later, Jason was discharged from the hospital. The day before, Helen had taken him to see her office and the pediatric wards where she worked. The gleam in the boy's eyes upon seeing the laboratories and medical equipment confirmed what Helen already suspected. He had inherited her passion for medicine. Can I come visit you at the hospital sometimes? Jason asked as he prepared to go home with Christine. Of course, replied Helen, controlling her emotion. And we'll see each other this weekend too, remember? We're going to the Science Museum. Jason nodded, then, unexpectedly, stepped forward and hugged Helen. It was the first time he had initiated physical contact like this. Helen closed her eyes, savoring the moment, feeling her heart overflow. Thank you for saving my life, he whispered, twice. Christine, observing the scene from the door, smiled through tears. When Jason stepped away, she approached Helen. He's excited about the weekend, said Christine. And thank you for understanding that we need time, for not trying to take everything from me at once. Helen nodded. We're three people who love the same boy. Somehow, we'll make this work. As she watched Christine and Jason leave the hospital, Helen reflected on the amazing journey they had traveled. A diagnosis, a birthmark, a DNA test, small elements that had triggered an avalanche of revelations and changes. Snow fell softly outside, covering Chicago with a white, pure blanket, like a blank page waiting to be written. Helen smiled. For the first time in 12 years, she felt her heart was complete again. Different, reconfigured, but complete. Her phone rang. It was a message from David. "Jason just called me. Said he wants me to teach him how to play baseball. Can you believe that?" Helen smiled, typing her response. "Our son is giving us a second chance. Let's make the most of it." And as she walked back to her office, Helen felt a growing certainty. Regardless of legal arrangements and complications, they had become a family. Different, unconventional, but united by what really mattered. Love for an extraordinary boy who, by a miracle of science and destiny, had found his way back home. This story reminds us of some powerful truths: that family bonds transcend time and distance, that healing comes in unexpected ways, and that sometimes our greatest pain can lead to our most profound joy. The miracle of Jason's discovery wasn't just medical. It was about the resilience of the human heart and our capacity to redefine family beyond conventional boundaries. It teaches us that truth, however painful, ultimately sets us free. Each character had to face difficult realities, yet through honesty and compassion, they found a path forward together. And perhaps most importantly, it shows us that love is not exclusive. It expands to embrace new possibilities. As Christine, Helen, and David discovered, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to put a child's needs above our own desires, creating a family circle wide enough for everyone who loves them. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of human connection and resilience. Your support helps us continue sharing these meaningful narratives that remind us what truly matters in life. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or similar experiences. We'd love to hear from you.